The Nightblade is cunning and a menace to everything that is unfortunate enough to cross the Nightblade's path. Having mastered the arts of dark magic combined with a proficiency in using deadly physical blades as well as magical swords, the Nightblade is an absolute monster on the battlefield. The Nightblade uses various types of night sorceries, dark sorceries, spellblade type of sorceries, and an extremely powerful INT DEX weapon. And with all of this, it just makes quick work of any challenge in Elden Ring, and it's just too much fun to play around with. The Nightblade is the evolved and late game version of my Samurai Mage or Spellblade build, which is the most powerful Intelligence and Dexterity mix build that you can make at the start of the game. Definitely check that video out as well if you haven't yet, as that video has a lot of relevant stuff you definitely want to know about as well. As you defeat Radon and just progress through the game, you unlock various new weapons and a lot of new options for an INT DEX build. One of the most important things is definitely the Wing of Astel weapon that you can get in the underground areas. The closest site of grace to this weapon is going to be the Astel River main, and you'll want to start heading south from there onwards. Wing of Astel is in my opinion definitely the best INT DEX weapon in the game, with the ridiculous things you can do with it, and therefore also going to be our main weapon in the late game. Because if you use it correctly, you can just blow everything up with it within mere seconds and do very nice combos with our sorceries. So get that thing for sure. When you have the weapon, you'll notice it has a few different types of things that make this weapon very nice. One of the main attractions is the Ash of War Nebula, because as you can see, within seconds you can do a ton of damage if you make sure your enemy is standing in the arc of exploding magic that you cast. What makes the Ash of War so powerful is that it's pretty easy to hit your enemies with it, as it goes out very quickly and doesn't cost a lot of FP, so you can just spam this Ash of War and make quick work of your opponent. It works especially well on big targets, as you will always hit all your explosions on big targets and therefore completely destroy big targets. At the same time, the Ash of War does good poise damage, so you can stance break your enemies pretty quickly, and this gives you all the time to just continuously keep casting Nebula or alternatively go in for the critical hit. Now with Wing of Astel, you don't however just want to use it Ash of War all the time, because the weapon itself is actually very nice as well, and you definitely do want to hit your enemies with the blade itself. Wing of Astel is a curved sword and therefore has a nice moveset. It does a ton of damage with the correct stat distribution, which I will show you later in this video, and especially its charge attack is really nice. The charge attack is actually quite unique if you compare it to other weapons in the game, as the charge attack has a magical component and basically shoots out a magical projectile that makes your charge attack have a much longer reach compared to your regular curved swords, and at the same time these projectiles hit your enemies quite hard, giving you a really nice way to hit your enemies when you're close to them. The charge attack also has good poise damage, so you can just use the weapon's actual moveset in addition to the Ash of War Nebula to completely decimate your enemy when you're close to them. Compared to other well-known INT DEX weapons like the Moonveil for example, Wing of Astel outdamages it easily with its damage potential. The great thing however about this build is that you can use multiple weapons at the same time, just like I showed in part 1. As INT DEX builds are flexible in nature, and with how I made this setup, it is also naturally just going to be optimized for various types of INT DEX weapons that have a nice Ash of War. I would recommend still using a weapon with Carian Grandeur and keeping it in the rotation next to Wing of Astel, that you then can use as a secondary weapon in your main hand slot for when you see a nice opportunity to fully charge it and hit your enemy, then subsequently swap to it and hit your opponents with a fully charged Carian Grandeur, because it will do insane damage. I showed you already how extremely powerful this Ash of War is early on, and a lot of fun things you can do with this Ash of War in part 1, but in the late game with a lot more stats, powerful talismans, optimization and so forth, it is some of the highest damage you will see coming from a single ability without needing to use any buffs. However, as you may know, every mob and boss in the late game has taken too much crystal meth and are hyperactive death machines, so you can just relax, drink a cup of tea on the side, watch some Netflix while you charge it up fully. The room you get to charge things up or do whatever is much smaller. That's why I also think nothing really beats Wing of Astel as a main weapon for an INT DEX late game build, as its Ash of War is AoE, easy to hit, comes out fast, you can cast it preemptively and safely, low FP calls, spammable, all the stuff I already said, and you can do nice combos with it, and it's a lot of fun to just blow things up. in Elden Ring, let's be honest. So get Wing of Astel as your main weapon, and now it's time to start working on our sorceries and staff to complement the build and really make the powerful Nightblade you saw in the intro. Wing of Astel has covered you in melee territory, but we still need a very good main late game spell that covers you when your enemy is in the distance, as well as other sorceries that just complement the build and theme very well. Now there's a class of sorceries in the game that is meant to be for Mage Assassins, and these sorceries are the Night sorceries, therefore it is also the main class of sorceries for the Nightblade. The main selling point of these sorceries is that enemies can't dodge them because they are supposed to be invisible. Unfortunately, making a build with only these sorceries is just not that great, because they just suck. So yeah, there goes my idea, pack up the build, and that's it for this video. I'm just kidding, because these two sorceries, Night Comet and Night's MADEN'S, are actually very nice and you can do a lot of stuff with them. Night Comet got a really nice buff a few patches ago, and after that it has definitely become a very viable and great spell actually. If you use the normal bread and butter type of sorceries like Comet, Glintstone Pebble, you name it, then enemies in the game can dodge them and they will just keep dodging them basically while they laugh at your incompetence. But that is a thing of the past thankfully, and that's why Night Comet is going to be our main ranged spell for this build. It fits the theme of the build very well, and it is a guaranteed hit against every enemy in the game, and it does a ton of damage with the right setup. As you can see here, it has a really nice range, you can cast it from a nice distance, get a lot of damage in that cannot be dodged, and you can just beat the game with this spell on its own, to be honest. It completely shreds a lot of bosses like Malenia, the hardest boss in the game. Just make sure to keep your distance and then shoot off your Night Comets. You can charge them as well, making them hit for even more, and rinse and repeat, and it will be the easiest dub of your life versus bosses like Malenia. And for all of these reasons that I mentioned, it is a very nice bread and butter type of spell versus any boss really. Every time you find yourself far away, start shooting these Night Comets, and by the time the boss is close to you, you have already chipped away a lot of their health. This is also the reason we will be using Staff of Laws as our main staff. The Staff of Laws has decent scaling, but more important is its passive, because it boosts invisible sorceries, such as Night Comet, exactly what we need, with a whopping 30% extra damage, and this will make Night Comet hit like an absolute truck. Put that thing in your left hand, make sure to upgrade it, and now we have our main late game staff. And the funny thing is, not that it really matters, but this is one of the few staffs in the game that actually has a dexterity scaling on it. So it fits an INT DEX build even more, even though the scaling is very low, but we don't talk about that. If you want to min-max it, you can also equip a staff with the highest scaling in the game, such as the Carian Scepter or Lucid Staff in your main hand as a secondary weapon, and then just switch to your staff while you're far away from the enemy and cast with your right hand instead. You'll get the passive bonus of your Staff loss from your left hand, but then at the same time will also cast with a higher scaling staff in your right hand. Usually you want to cast Night Comet in the distance anyway, so you won't be using our main weapon, Wing of Astel, in those cases. Therefore it is something you can definitely consider if you want to go the extra mile. And if you want to go another mile, you can ask someone to trade you a second Staff of Loss, because it's not that hard of a pickup at all. And in that case, use two Staffs of Loss in both hands and get both passives stacking, leading into even more damage. But if you don't want to think about all of this stuff and you can't be arsed, then just using one Staff of Loss and casting it from your left hand will deal plenty of damage, and it is 100% more than enough. That is a choice for you to make. Night Comet also has an AoE aspect, as you can pierce enemies with it, which can lead in a lot of damage to multiple enemies at the same time. You just have to find the right angle or make your enemies line up, and it's really fun to special beam cannon them like this. Now the other Night sorcery you want to pick up is the Night's MADEN'S. Night's MADEN'S is a controlled and slow AoE spell that will just reliably kill off your enemies over time. It's a completely different type of spell compared to pretty much all other sorceries in the game, but that is also what makes it really good actually. You can just cast it in one place and spray it all over the place and just see everything slowly die in it while you relax. You can also use it as a bait to get a large group of mobs come quickly to you, like a bunch of idiots, and then when they're close to you, you just nuke them with Nebula. Both these Night sorceries and the Staff of Laws can be picked up in the same area right here. The Staff of Laws and Night Comet can be picked up in the Town of Sorcery, Celia specifically, at respectively these two spots. And you can buy Night's MADEN'S from Gowry after doing the Kaled part of his questline. Now for other sorceries, you definitely want to pick up RANNI'S Dark Moon as it fits the theme of the build and does good AoE damage, but more importantly it applies a really nice debuff on your enemies as it lowers your enemy's magic negation, meaning you will afterwards start dealing more damage with your other magic, and this is why you always want to use this spell as an opener in every battle basically. Especially in boss fights. You also want to get Adula's Moonblade, just a nice magical frost greatsword spell that fits the spellblade side of the Nightblade. It's a sword you can use as a melee range type of AoE spell to deal a lot of damage and apply frostbite on your enemies as well. Conveniently, both RANNI'S Dark Moon and Adula's Moonblade are related to RANNI'S questline, and you can get both of them doing this questline. So definitely do that questline and get these two spells. Regarding other spellblade spells, you just want to keep everything from part 1 really. Pretty much everything that I went over in that video is still really good in the late game, so keep those sorceries in the roster as well. You will want to make one specific change though. You want to swap out one sorcery because you can now upgrade Glintblade Phalanx with Carian Phalanx that you can buy from Celephus. With Carian Phalanx you will almost double the number of blades you cast and deal a lot more damage to your enemy. Carian Phalanx is nice to cast at the start of a boss fight, or to get damage in reliably, because you can always just cast it when you're not in danger or far away from your enemy, or you can just use it as a defensive arc of sorts that is always surrounding you, that will protect you while you roam through areas filled with dangerous mobs. And finally, you also want to get the Founding Rain of Stars sorcery. It is a very powerful sorcery that also looks really cool. Just look at that, visually it's very appealing. You can get it in the mountaintops of the Giants area in a chest right here. Yet again, it fits the theme of the build very well with its dark theme and description. It's a damage over time type of sorcery, and if you make sure that your opponent stays as long as possible under the clouds, it packs a punch and deals a nice amount of damage to your opponent. You'll hit your enemies for thousands and thousands of damage. What is even better with this sorcery is that it essentially keeps staggering everything that keeps getting hit under the clouds. Due to the staggers of the rain, it's not that hard to get all of the damage in when you cast a sorcery, and it's a nice way to set up combos with your other abilities. For example, you can cast Night's MADEN'S under the clouds as well, and then chain that with some nebulas, and thanks to the staggers of the rain, all of these different damaging AoE abilities will just completely gangbang your opponents and give you all the control you want over them. Now if you have made it to this point in the video, then that can only mean one thing: you like the video, so make sure to not forget to give the video a like. And if you're still not subscribed to me, then we need to talk right now.
Okay, we can keep it short. Just hit that f***ing button.
Now you'll have a full roster of powerful sorceries, a nice staff, and an epic weapon. Because we have very high intelligence with this build, in reality you can run any sorcery in the game really, including everything that doesn't fit the team at all, but is OP nonetheless. So it's all good if you want to completely ruin the idea of the build and mix up the build to your own liking. I've covered pretty much all of the OP sorceries before, so I'll leave links in the description if you want to know more about those kinds of sorceries and mix up the build however you want. Now it's time to talk about everybody's favorite subject: stats. For a level 125 build, you definitely want to get at least 50 intelligence to reach the first soft cap on Wing of Astel's weapon damage as well as its Ash of War, because the Ash of War follows the same soft cap curve trajectory as intelligence scaled weapon damage. The last soft cap is at 80 for both sorceries and weapon damage, but it's really not worth getting so heavy into intelligence for an INT DEX build. Past the first soft cap, in my opinion, I would say get 60 intelligence, and then with the flask you will be able to cast every single intelligence sorcery in the game if you care about those sorceries. Otherwise you can just park it at 50. For example, you need 68 intelligence for RANNI'S Dark Moon. So with 60 intelligence you'll reach the first soft cap of sorcery based damage, so not weapon based intelligence damage but sorcery based damage, and then with the flask you will be able to cast spells like RANNI'S Dark Moon for every single fight and get that nice debuff going. And you want to get at least like 25 mind, I would say, and 50 vigor to have a good amount of tankiness, as well as be able to comfortably cast our sorceries and nebula. Then also put a few points into endurance to get some more stamina so it's easier when you chain cast, and then put the rest into dexterity to complement the rest of our weapon damage for this index build. And for sorceries it will also make us cast a little bit faster as well, which is also nice. For a level 150 build I would fully soft cap on vigor, get 60 vigor, get like a few more points into mind, I would say 30 to really be comfortable when casting. I did it with 25, it was more than enough in my opinion, but with 30 you will have all the comfort you need. And then just put the final 10 points into dexterity if you feel like you never actually use your sword, in the sense that you hit enemies with the blade itself. because I know a lot of people also just like the magic aspect and casting, then I would just put those points into intelligence instead. So that's really something that's just up to personal playstyle and preference. Now for the flask and talismans, it's pretty standard. Talismans, you want to run Alexander's Shard that you obtain from Iron Fist Alexander's questline. To increase damage to Nebula is really good and a no-brainer. Then you want to get the Magic Scorpion Charm that you get from Celeph's questline. Another no-brainer. Everything we have in our kit is magic damage based or consists heavily out of magic damage, so it will just buff all of our damage output with a significant percentage. We have a lot of HP for both a level 125 and 150 build, especially in PvE, so we kind of offset the increased damage you take from this talisman. Then because we are a hybrid INT DEX build, the next two talismans are mainly for our sorceries. You want to get the Graven Mass talisman that you can also get in the mountaintops of the Giants area. This will increase all our sorceries with 8% extra damage, so that's really nice. And then finally we still want to use the Godfrey's Icon talisman that we picked up in part 1, because a bunch of our sorceries have a charge component, including Night Comet, our main long range spell. So with this talisman it will make it hit really hard. And if you also still use Carian Grandeur on a secondary weapon, then this is also going to be really nice for that. For the flask, you want to use the Magic Shrouding Crack tier. Again, for the same reason we use the Magic Scorpion Charm, it will increase all of our damage output. The second crystal tier is still going to be the Intelligence Not Crystal tier, for the reason it gives us 10 points in intelligence for free, and thus we don't have to invest our actual levels into intelligence beyond the first soft cap to be able to cast the sorceries with the highest level requirements. For that purpose it's really nice, and it also just increases our damage output as well at the same time. If you don't care about the high level sorceries in the game, then you can also swap it out with the Cerulean Hidden tier, which will make you able to cast sorceries for free for 10 seconds, which is a really nice alternative option as well. Finally, for gear we have two options. The first one is the offensive option using the Spellblade set. Now this set actually increases the damage output of a lot of magic related Ash of Wars in the game, even though its description says something else. And this also applies in our case because it actually also raises Nebula's damage output. And since this is our Ash of War that you will want to use frequently, this set is going to be really nice for that, because wearing the entire set will increase the damage output of Nebula with another 8%, which is definitely a nice and welcome bonus. With this bonus to damage, it's also one of the few sets in the game that actually has a functional use outside of defense. And this might be a bug, because it's different than what is stated in the description of the Spellblade set. I'm not sure, but it has never been patched, so if you're watching this video in the future and this actually got changed or patched, then you'll want to use the second option. This is the defensive option and aesthetically follows the theme of the build. For this I use Blight's helmet, Knight's cavalry armor and greaves, and the Bullgoat's gauntlet. Now the first option at the expense of dealing more damage will make you really squishy, so you have to be careful with that option. But with this option you will deal less damage, but you will also have above 50 poise, so you can actually resist stance breaking hits and you will have a lot more armor, so when you get hit you won't lose as much HP. Which option you want to use ultimately is really up to you, but if you go with the second option you'll want to get some more endurance so you don't end up in the heavy load category. Now you know everything you want to know about my Nightblade build, the strongest INT DEX build out there. This build has a lot of variety to it and it's a lot of fun to play, so enjoy making it and playing with it. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and also hit the bell thing so you're the first to get notified when I upload something, and also let me know your thoughts in the comments.